Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests. And side quests.
Episode 105, The Goblin's Guard. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Kevin Ngo's table in the Levitating Platter. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. I have a wonderful guest lined up for you this week, but before we get to my mystery contestant, I got to do it the first ad read from Plus One EXP. Tony Vicenda's the mastermind behind this mastercraft of beard balms, game design, community building, the whole shebang. He's got beard balms named after all the basic stats from D&D, so if you get yourself a can, you can apply it to your face and smell the sweet aroma and the sweet victory that comes along with increased strength, dexterity, charisma, and more. Beards and Beyond is the indie RPG that helped to launch this entire brand, but Tony has worked on several other games, including Repugnant, I Toaster, Down We Go, Through the Void, Vamp Nugula, and Brandstanding, just to name a few. And if you support Plus One EXP, either by buying something on their website or by going to tonyplusone.itch.io, it all helps funnel into the Plus One Forward program, which seeks to support additional indie tabletop content creators to continue making awesome stuff. So I would highly encourage you to follow Tony and Plus One EXP on all of the socials, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and be sure to join the Discord server as well in order to keep up with all the various projects that are being worked on, as well as upcoming interviews, one-shots, and actual plays of some of these other amazing indie TTRPGs. And if you don't mind, when you go to the website plus1exp.com and you see that affiliate code box, type in the code Randolph at checkout when you're buying a beard balm or a beard RPG in order to get some savings on your purchase at no extra cost to you. Again, that code is Randolph at checkout on the website plus1exp.com. All right, and without further ado, hello, mystery contestant. Would you care to introduce yourself, tell us who it is that you are, and what is it that you do?
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a senior financial analyst at a large hospital in Chicago, and I'm also a father of three young boys, all 6 and under. So that will become a little bit more important later. Yes.
Awesome, yes. And you were someone from the community who reached out and wanted to be on the podcast. Is that correct?
Yes. My brother-in-law works with you, and then he's like, "Oh, have you heard of Sidekicks and Side Quests?" I'm like, "I didn't at first," and then I started listening to a few episodes, and it's like, this is pretty cool. This is great because I'm trying to get back into DMing, and that will come up a little bit later. But yeah, so this has been a great resource.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That is the aim that I strive for, is to make this a very resource centric sort of a show, that there's lots of good, valuable knowledge here that everyone can use. Well, continuing on with our questions, pretty easy one, but do you currently or have you ever played D&D before?
Yeah, and so this requires a little bit of explanation. So while I was in high school, I played in 3.5, a little bit of 4, but I ended up not liking it and selling
Hmm.
all my books. Then college came, and I just kind of took like a 10-year hiatus, mostly because I was too busy or I didn't really find people who wanted to play. And
Hmm.
strangely, like I didn't think I'd be able to play for a long time because I got married and had kids. But then I thought about maybe I'll introduce my 5-year-old, and now he's 6. So we started playing Old School Essentials, which is a a clone of D&D Basic from the 1980s. So
Mhm.
it's really simple. So my 6-year-old can understand it, and we actually play way more D&D than I ever did back in the day.
Wow. That's awesome. And what's that experience like of gaming with your kids for you?
Oh, it's great. Like it gives him a lot of opportunity to use his imagination. Also, it's really good for math too because like we homeschool, and so he gets this opportunity to apply math in a fun way. So he's and I don't know if anyone knows about like older versions of D&D, but he can calculate THACO and do that all in his head. And
That's impressive. Yeah, are we ready for him to be in charge of the space program to get us back to the moon?
yeah, I do wonder, and that actually is funny because he's like, "Oh, I love fantasy, but can we play D&D in space?" So I ended up ordering a sci-fi RPG. It's a clone of Traveler. I don't know if you've ever heard of that either. It's like the first sci-fi one.
I feel like I have heard of it, but I don't have any experience playing it.
Yeah, it's just one of those classic ones. I think it came out 3 years after D&D, and there's been many versions, but there's also been like a kind of an open source version called Cepheus Engine that's been, I wouldn't call it popular, but popular in a small like sci-fi RPG community. So we're going to start playing that as well.
Okay. Curious though, I wonder what your son's opinion on Spelljammer is. I know they redid it for a 5th edition.
Ah, yeah. No, at some point I think we'll try some fifth edition. We haven't played fifth edition, me personally or him, just because I wanted to do more rules light
Okay.
D&D before we go into that.
Before
But
you dive into the deep end. I gotcha.
yeah, but he has said like when can we play fifth edition? He's asked it a few times. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah.
Well, maybe he can listen to this podcast and get some ideas for some characters to stick in his games.
Yeah, and actually I went to work one day and I came back and he took the graph paper and he like made his own dungeon, and it's like his own rules, like his own house rules, but it's
Mhm.
pretty similar to BX D&D. So like he remembers a lot of it. So
That's
he's
awesome.
already DMing. I didn't even ask him to. He just kind of did it on his own.
You just showed him the basics and then you took off running.
Oh yeah.
Awesome to hear. Well, of course, as you know, this podcast is called Sidekicks and Side Quests. So we always like to ask the questions about who happens to be your favorite NPC, whether they're from one of your RPGs or maybe a particular video game, or if not, maybe film, literature, history, television, etc. And why is this character your favorite?
Before I even played pen and paper D&D, like my first experience with D&D was Baldur's Gate 2, and
Mm.
my favorite has got to be Minsk and Boo, just because they
Mm.
give so much levity to a pretty serious game. Like he's kind of goofy. Like, is he kind of insane? You're not really quite sure, but he talks
Hmm.
to this space hamster
Oh
all
yeah,
the
and they
time.
do make an appearance in Spelljammer, that's for sure.
Oh, they do. Okay,
With the 5e stuff, yeah. The bestiary book, I think.
okay. I'll have to check it out one of these days.
Yeah. But Minsk and Boo, classic, good choice, great choice, some might say. What's been one of your favorite side quests, either from RPG, video game, movie, film, television, etc.? And why has this side quest been one of your favorites?
This was really hard. So instead of picking one from a movie, I picked a minor event in history. Well, it's pretty serious, but it's like kind of a footnote because I'm also a history note. So I studied abroad in Lithuania, and there's this man that's not really well known here. His name's Sugihara, and long story short, he was a diplomat in Lithuania right before the start of World War II. So they
Ooh.
posted him there to kind of keep an eye on Germany and the Soviet Union. He was given a really horrible situation in his lap. Like once the war started, a lot of Jews started running to neutral Lithuania, and it didn't last. It wasn't neutral for very long, but
Hmm.
in the meantime, I think it was just like a few months. He just ended up just disobeying orders and just writing transit visas for Jews to go to exit and go somewhere else, but with the intention that there was nowhere else to go. He just wanted to get them away from Nazi Germany. So he ended up writing enough visas for like 100,000 people. He's just doing it around the clock.
Wow. And so then they went to Japan?
Yeah, and then from there, other places, I'm not entirely sure, but just away. And he kind of did it against orders. Like, yeah, he just kind of did it out of his own initiative, and he Like no one knows for sure, but he might have like gotten reprimanded for that too. But like, and he was kind of obscure for a long time until like later in life before he died, where people recognized
And which country was he an ambassador of?
Imperial Japan.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so this is before like the formal Axis powers alliance and stuff like that?
I think they were allied with Germany. He was just stationed in a neutral country, and I'm trying to remember all the details, but he just saw the situation where a lot of Jews needed him, and he just
Mhm.
did it. Like,
Wow. I've
yeah,
never heard of this gentleman's story, and this sounds fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. There's a history guy YouTube video on it. It's like 15 minutes. I could have you put it in the notes or
Oh
something. It's
yeah,
pretty
well, we could
interesting.
definitely put that in the show notes for sure. Yeah, so more people can learn about this interesting real life person from history, and then maybe find a way to like recontextualize for a D&D game perhaps.
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of intrigue there. So like, I mean, he was put there to spy on two different countries. So like, yeah, you could totally you can use some ideas from that.
And then the final question that we like to ask here in the personal interview section, what are you passionate about and why?
So I would say I have very eclectic tastes and interests. Like I would say they're so eclectic that I've always wondered if I'm a unique data point when it comes to marketers. Like just because I like some very random things. So I would say my family, we're like traditional Catholics, so we do have like a tendency to like Latin mass, but we don't exclusively go there. So like my faith is very important to me.
Mhm.
A totally different topic like I like is financial independence. So I'm
Hmm.
really into reading. You can just Google. There's something called FIRE. It's called Financial Independence Retire Early. It's like a kind of a big movement on the
Mhm.
internet, at least. But there's you could do an entire podcast on it. But if you are interested in money stuff, it's really cool. So just Google FIRE. And then we love traveling and experiencing the world and different cultures and history. And then the last two things, we love to bike and walk and live in vibrant cities. So we actually live like right outside of downtown Chicago. So we spend most of our time walking around and biking and seeing the city and just enjoying life in this great city. And of course, TTRPGs and board games in general are just great. And they haven't been as prominent in my life until more recently again. But I'm so glad that I can live as a gamer again.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're living the high life. And we'll carry that spirit and gratitude forward into a segment that I like to call NPC creation. NPC creation is brought to you by you, podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. So now is the time in the show where we give a shout out to our comfortable patrons and above with a loud hurrah. So to you, Katie Downey, Anson Jablinski, and my parents, we say cheers. So again, this is for patrons who donate $2 or more a month. And these folks are what are classified as my wealthy level patrons. So that means they also get to introduce an element of chance to the random tables that we have for NPC creation, which you might get to hear them used here today. So if you want to learn more and join our cool podcast Patreon community, check the show notes below. Go to my podcast website or just go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and side quests to find out more about our tiers and help us expand our operations in the levitating platter in this demi-plane and worlds beyond. All right. So before we started the record button on the podcast, you said that you kind of wanted to do a hybrid. Like you have a skeleton of an idea, but there are some elements that you're up for totally randomizing. Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly like names. So my idea is that so this isn't completely original. Like one of the prominent elements of old school D&D is like the frequent use of factions and dungeons. So,
Hmm.
there's like maybe other adventuring parties or like a group of monsters who hates another group of monsters and you kind of like play them off each other. And I can't remember what dungeon it was, but there was like a group of like maybe gnolls or something that like they found a well and they started guarding it and they sell water to like other people in the dungeon. So I wanted to take
Oh.
that further. So the goblins are always the punching bag of like every dungeon. They all get slaughtered. So there was just a small group of goblin brothers and they're just tired of dying. Like they don't want to end up like their fellow goblins. So, and
Mhm.
they kind of are a little more entrepreneurial. So, what they end up doing is they find a dungeon, they find a well, and they start monopolizing, like selling a bucket of water at 5 gold pieces a bucket, which is outrageous. So
Mhm.
that's a lot of money. But
Yeah.
they've also started doing other things like selling overpriced turkey legs and other things, and not just to adventurers, but monsters as well.
Oh, so it's like they've made like a safe zone within the dungeon that like everyone can kind of come to?
Yeah, so their area is like just kind of full of intrigue, and there's kind of this unwritten rule that you leave your problems at the door, almost like if you've seen John Wick, like the Continental Hotel, like you can't
Mhm.
do anything there. So it's kind of a cross between that and like expensive concessions at Disney World. So
Now, is this like a bar built up around a well, or is it like the infancy of like a proper town, or if you will, in the middle of like a dungeon complex?
I imagine it more like kind of like a bar. Like yeah, there's just like bar with like supplies and like a little canteen.
Okay.
Yeah, not really quite a town. I kind of wanted it to be on the little bit of edge of goofiness, but not too unbelievable.
Yeah, because I mean, this could be a world where it's just like all sorts of dungeons. Like the surface is too dangerous, so everyone has to live in the dungeons. And so it's like, well, these Goblin brothers, I guess, set up shop, and they instead of being feral and mean and violent about it, they decided to think with their financial smarts.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's a good premise. Okay, and so I guess we'll work our way through the question since it sounds like we have like a trio of brothers, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have an idea on the names, or are you needing to roll some dice and get some names?
Yeah, that's where I wanted to roll it because I was like, I don't know if you have a goblin table. Like, there is some inspiration from the Pathfinder goblins as well because I love the way they re-imaged the goblin as well. So they're
Hmm.
being a little more, a little cute, having a little bit more personality. So
Okay. I have a D20 table, and you can just roll on it 3 times, and we can kind of see what names we get, and then figure out how they're all siblings, I suppose.
yeah, yeah, no, that works for me. I'm pulling out my D20 right as we speak.
Perfect.
Um, let's see, I got 8, 14, and 18.
So working our way down the list. So at 8, your answer provided by previous guest Matthew J. Hansen, Rosewald Daybrace. Number 14, provided by previous guest Kevin Chenard, Finn Wheatley. And then the last one, provided by previous guest Sam Rusk, Arili. So it looks like we've got like two of them that sound like they have like completely different surnames. And then one of them just goes by Arili, which is spelled Arili.
Is there a really a girl? Because maybe it could be two brothers and a sister. I never thought about that. That could be pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Rosewald, yeah, Rosewald sounds like a feminine name, at least to my personal opinion. Finn, yeah, Finn Wheatley,
Yeah,
Rosewald Daybrace, and then Arili.
yeah, cool.
It's whatever you want. I mean, these are your characters, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I'll go with it.
Okay, and so they're cool with having all these different names then.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe they just
Some of them decided to adopt like more common sounding names than the last
yeah.
one's like, no, I like my name how it is. I don't need a silly name or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, like, thinking of, like, since they do more business with lots of diverse group of people, like, maybe they didn't wanna do goblin names, so
Mm. Yeah, they didn't want to scare them off when they were, sending contract paperwork back and forth. Like, oh, Rosewald Daybrace, sure, yeah, I'll agree to sell barrels of ale to them, sure, no problem, or whatever.
yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Ancestry we've talked about is goblin, like straight up like regular goblin, like the kind of goblins you might find in the Pathfinder version with the big bobbleheads.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. So just three regular goblins. All right. And then let's see the job or role in society. So it sounds like they're like tavern owners. Does each one specialize in a particular thing?
I haven't gotten that far yet, but that is a good thing to think about.
Yeah, because you got Rosewald, you have Finn, and then you have Aurelie.
Yeah, maybe one's a cook, one deals more with the money, and then one is, like, the enforcer, just kinda keeping order, and they probably have other goblins that are hired hands too, so that it's not just the 3 of them.
Do you think it's like a whole diverse group of goblins? So you might have like some hobgoblins or bugbears in the mix too?
Probably, yeah, yeah, other humanoids, and then yeah, I just wanted to keep these three the most prominent because they eventually want to expand and franchise.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So if you had to kind of assign, so we said there was a cook, we said there was someone who ran the money, and then there was someone who's kind of like security. So of those three, who do you think does what?
Aurelie is kind of the enforcer,
Security and
security, and everything. Maybe
okay.
Finn's the cook.
Finn, okay. Rosewald
Rosewald,
is the
yep,
books and the money and all that
yeah.
stuff. This is like a proper tavern then. So it's like there's room and board and drink and food, maybe even some sort of like basic general supplies or bartering corner or something like that.
Yeah, maybe less of a tavern and more like I just imagine like if you've ever gone to a lot of developing countries where they just have like street food stands where it's just like plastic chairs on the side of the road kind of thing, except in a dungeon. So
Okay.
just very basic.
Like a very small building that they've constructed that's somehow next to this well.
Yeah, because everyone needs water. So
Yeah, and so Aureli's job is like to guard the well along with his team to make sure no one's doing anything funny. And then Finn is like inside the tiny building cooking food. And then Rosewald kind of like walks around and like takes orders and holds on to the money and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, that sounds great.
And then let's see, how old are our goblins?
I don't know what their age ranges are, but they're in general just young and ambitious.
Not like children, but they're like
Yeah,
proper young adults, basically.
yeah, they just know they've seen too many of their family and clan folk get slaughtered by adventurers or orcs or other other humanoids.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, they watched, one of their neighbors get, dissolved in a side of a gelatinous cube.
Oh yeah.
Let's describe the physical appearance of these siblings. So when you picture Rosewald Daybrace, Finn Wheatley, and Arili, what are you seeing based on what we know their jobs are?
So Rosewald like definitely has one of those like those coin belt things, the ones where I'm trying to think, almost like the I don't even know if you'd find that in a D&D world, like the
You could if you wanted to.
yeah, like those arcade coin like
Oh, yeah,
dispenser
she,
things.
like, presses a button and, like, gold, silver, and copper pieces come out of
Yeah.
it.
Oh
It's like a
yeah.
huge contraption, so that's, like, pretty hefty on her if she's a goblin.
Yeah. And then Finn's carrying a, frying pan, maybe some tongs, maybe they have a grill, and then
Mm, a nice charcoal grill.
yeah. And then Aureli's I don't know what's a good weapon for her, but she's tougher than her size looks. So
Aurelia and Rosewald are the sisters then, and Finn's the brother.
yeah.
Even though they're all, like, regular goblin size, she's kind of like Aurelia's the more beefy, muscular of the siblings.
Yep.
I was gonna say, are you thinking like a scimitar or an axe or something like that?
Scimitar sounds good.
Obviously, with Rosewald having to interact with customers and stuff, aside from the big coin contraption she wears to dole out change and take money and stuff, is there like any way in how she dresses or appears when she's like interacting with all these people?
I wouldn't say like a very fancy dress, but like definitely like they're better dressed than you would think a goblin would be. Like I don't know, like
They took it off like a kid's toy or something like that.
yeah, I don't know where they would have found it, but they're well dressed by goblin standards. She's in like a kind of a serving dress, but usually what do you see goblins wear? I don't know, like rags or something.
Mm, yeah. And then of course Finn probably looks like a like I'd imagine like a fry cook or something like
Yeah.
that with a big chef's hat and like a big leather apron for his size and just for some reason I got the vision of him chomping on a huge cigar, although I don't know if that's something that Finn would necessarily do while he's cooking the food.
Yeah.
Maybe just eats cigars instead of smokes them. I don't know if you wanted to give him that kind of a quirk. And then, of course, anyone who listens to this episode can mix and match, the details however they need them to see fit in their game. So if you like the idea of a goblin that eats cigars rather than smoke cigars, then that is your choice to make.
Yeah. No, you've definitely given me a lot of ideas because I had a small idea for popping around my head in the last couple weeks, but I didn't really. I wanted to wait to flesh this out on air.
Sure. Well, that's what we're here to do, provide a public service. And then if you had to describe each of them with three adjectives, what three adjectives would you use?
Um,
Triple the work.
oh yeah. I've only thought about them collectively. They're all very determined to survive, so that's one of their big motivations. They're just survivors.
Hmm.
They're very clever. Like that's how they've gotten here, and they're entrepreneurial. So
Hmm.
they want to do something different than their fellow goblins.
Okay. So they're determined to survive and they're entrepreneurial. Is there maybe like one adjective between the siblings that like uniquely describes each of them? Like, so like, okay, this is generally how they all are. But then if you looked at Rosewald, you could tell like, this is the adjective versus Finn versus Arili.
Rosewald's definitely the miser. She can tell if like one of the other servers like swiped a coin or something, or if anyone came up short, or she watches the money closely for
Mhm.
the firm. And yeah, you could definitely help me. I'm
Oh,
This is
okay.
like all half baked concept so far.
Finn's interest, with surviving and then also with being financially motivated, is there a reason that he gravitated towards cooking the food? Was it just because he was the most comfortable doing it? He has a love for food. He wants to try and explore other foods, or, maybe he was, convincing to his sisters to be like, look, people, they like water, but they also like to eat stuff too. And it would make sense if we like sold food too.
Maybe earlier on he had found a cookbook and somehow managed to read it. So like, and
Okay.
I mean, it would be hard for Goblin to go out to like human and elven and dwarven civilization because they'd probably be killed. But
Hmm.
he kind of dreams of cooking, although that might be hard, like cooking in maybe a restaurant or something.
Okay, so he's kind of ambitious
Yeah,
for himself. Like yeah, he's fine helping out his siblings, but his pie in the sky dream is to one day I want to be out there cooking in the castles and stuff like that. I want to
yeah,
have my own food cart in a major city, kind of a thing.
yeah.
Okay. As far as Aureli's concerned, since, she's the muscle.
She just kind of fell into it because she was the toughest of the siblings, and there was a need, so she's there to be of service.
Yeah, who's doing it because they know it's the thing to do. They're especially built or tasked for the job. So for some reason, I'm getting like Luisa from Encanto vibes in my head when I'm picturing her. Really, not that she's necessarily that big of a goblin, but maybe just like responsible. I don't know if responsible is the right one, or just tough. Okay, so maybe like a placeholder value in the terms of like, okay, so she's the toughest. She knows it's like what she's made for. It's no, she knows like she can do the job the best as far as like guarding and, maybe charismatic, depending on if she commands the respect of the other probably physically bigger goblins to like listen to her to want to guard this well of water and not, just overtake them themselves.
Yeah,
And then comes to the question of what's going to be a valuable item, piece of lore, secret, or ideal or concept that each of our characters ascribes to. If you know something, you can do it. Or, we haven't rolled the dice in a while. If you just want to roll a bunch of D4s and D6s, we can kind of figure out what some of these things are.
yeah. I actually would love to roll some. I know one ideal that I wanted to instill is that they're very tolerant of all creatures, so they don't care as long as they bring in business.
That sounds like a Rosewald sort of a thing. She doesn't
Yeah,
care where you come from, what your lineage or ancestry is. In her mind, it's like it's the money that does the talking.
yep. But yeah, I can break out some dice because this it's always fun when you roll something random and it just gives you new ideas.
Yeah, for sure. So you would roll a d4 for the category, and then you roll a d6 for the particular thing.
I got a 4.
A 4 is an ideal or concept. So now you can roll a d6, and we'll figure out which of the siblings would ascribe to this idea.
3.
3. Okay. Your answer was provided by previous guest Travis Frederick. Faith. So, of the siblings, which of them cares the most about faith?
Maybe we could flesh out Aurelie.
Yeah, so, like, maybe she's really into, like, goblin honor culture, might
Yeah.
makes right and that kind of a thing, so she, like, takes the goblin pantheon seriously, and that's maybe how she's able to command the respect of other goblins as far as, like, "Oh, she's smaller than us, but she's definitely more pious and devout, so therefore she commands more respect," kind of a thing.
Yeah, no, I like that.
She's, like, going around quoting, goblin scripture verses at them, and they, like when they're, like, acting out, and then they snap to attention like, "Oh, you're right, really, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking," kind of a thing. And that may be your 3rd adjective is pious or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's actually good.
Okay, very cool. And then let's see, so then we have Finn left, I guess, so D4, D6.
Okay. Two,
Okay, 2 would be a piece of lore.
and three.
3. Aha, your answer was provided by our Patreon supporter, Goblin Katie, aka Katie Downey. According to this, Finn Wheatley knows the origin stories of all player character races. So maybe he found more books than just a cookbook.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or he just listens to a lot of stories while he's cooking food.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, if he found a cookbook, he probably found other books too, and he's the most interested in the world because he has this pie in the sky dream of I don't know, working in a restaurant outside of goblin culture, but it
Mhm.
will be a tough one to to do in most fantasy worlds.
Right. Yeah. Or like I posited like a food truck in a major metropolis where they're a little
Yeah.
more tolerant if that is the default assumption of your game world. All right. Well, now we come to the question of what is going to be a particular quest that these goblins would be willing to recruit or hire player characters to go and do? Is it going to be something that they're all collectively asking for, or do you want to split it up into each one of the goblins has their own particular side quest?
On top of like the neutral meeting place where you could probably find a lot of other quests from different factions that might be inhabiting the dungeon.
Hmm.
One in particular that I would give from them collectively is that there were some gnolls came. The goblins are neutral and they let everyone come. If you dine and dash, that is against the rules. So they
Mm.
want you to track down some gnolls who, they just bought some turkey legs and water. And well, they didn't buy it. That's why they they want you to go after them.
Oh, interesting. So, is it standard practice for you to get your food before you've paid, or is Rosewald the kind to be like, no, you have to pay first before you get the food?
It would definitely be you get your food first. So just to make
Mm.
this story work. So
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Because there's also an implied honor system when it comes to this place, especially when you have Arili, who's very pious. So she probably goes around, barking periodically about like the rules of good conduct and stuff like that. And Rosewald's there, obviously walking around and enforcing in her way by like making sure the good quality food and water gets delivered and promptly getting payment and stuff like that. Curious if you're going to leave it open to dungeon masters to figure out how this particular thing happened. Like they somehow caused a distraction, and that's how they were able to escape without paying, kind of a thing.
yeah, no, I was thinking they flipped over a table or something and they just kind of walked out before anyone could react.
They threw a smoke bomb and disappeared.
Yeah, I hadn't thought that far ahead, but yeah, I
Okay.
was gonna figure something out like
So
that.
the gnolls made a scene, whether it was flipping a table, throwing a smoke bomb, saying, "Hey, look, what's that over there?" or whatever they did. They escaped. They dined and dashed. Okay, and so then all 3 siblings want you to go and undertake this mission. Okay. So then what is going to be the reward if the player characters are successful in navigating the dungeon complex and finding out where these gnolls are camped out or live?
So that's the thing. The reward, it will seem like just like, wait, what? I went through all that trouble. So they actually just offer a free meal, which ordinarily would be an expensive roast turkey leg and some free water. So it just feels really bad. It's not a lot of reward because they probably don't have all that much money, but
Mhm.
it does have consequences down the line, minor consequences in that like they want to franchise and I envision them actually being successful. So like it's the reward is goodwill of like having a good contact that will show up in many dungeons. I think eventually there'll be good information brokers and having the goodwill of these goblins is will actually be pretty useful in and of itself for the player characters.
Okay. All right. So the immediate reward is okay, you get a free meal and some water for doing your good deed. But later on in the campaign, as the story progresses, they'll find out that these goblins were able to franchise. And then suddenly these businesses are a little bit more friendly towards the player characters because of the good deeds that they did.
Yeah, and so if they refuse to help, it's like there's no real immediate consequence, but they don't have as much goodwill, and as their business expands, like they're just a little less friendly to the player characters.
Okay. So either way, the business does plan on expanding.
Yeah, and this is just like a small thing because it's like kind of like a little bit of an aside. Obviously, it's not going to be the main quest of the whole dungeon. It's just kind of this little thing on the side just to give it a little bit of flavor and flair.
Do the goblins perceive failure in different stages differently? Like, do they only care about getting payment, or do they care that these gnolls stay alive and that they're repeat customers?
Uh, I think they're more motivated. Well, one, the money. It's probably not that much, but just the honor.
hmm
They don't like that they were ripped off. So it's probably more about their dignity.
I feel like it might color the flavor though, because maybe, up until this point, the honor system hadn't been tested. And so this is like the first big test. And so depending on how player characters resolve it, could be like, oh, like this place gets a fearsome reputation because did you hear what happened to the group of gnolls that, dined and dashed? They all got murdered. And so everyone's like fearful when they go to this place, even though it's supposed to be like friendly neutral ground. Like everyone's like, real tense and stuff like that. But if the player characters somehow resolve it peacefully, maybe they trick them out of their money or something like that, then maybe everyone's a little more, maybe not happy go lucky, but they're at least a little more relaxed and stuff like that, where they know, like, hey, man, you got to play by the rules. And, they're just going to come get the money, so it's just better and good manners to just pay versus like, oh, you better pay or else they're going to murder you if you don't pay for this turkey leg.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, I hadn't thought that far ahead, but yeah, there's probably a good way to do it more peacefully.
There's the Paragon way, and there's the Renegade way of resolving this side quest.
Yeah.
All right, well, now that we've learned about these trio of siblings, I think it's time we head into a random encounter. All right, and this segment would be brought to you by a sponsorship, but at the time of this recording, I don't have one. So if you want to change that and have me promote your product, why don't you go ahead and send me an email at sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. I'd be happy to look over it, read your proposal, whether it's from a rich noblewoman or eccentric lord. I'll be happy to promote that here. Of course, go ahead and give a shout out to Zencastr, which is the podcast app recording service that I'm using to do these episodes, and they do have a monetization program. And so I hope that the more of you listen and get traffic through that, that we can get some cool sponsorship deals through that. So maybe take that into consideration as well. But otherwise, just thank you so much for listening. And now back to the podcast. Okay, so this is the random encounter section where we get to do a little bit of a role play, a little bit of a vignette, if you will, with the characters. Since we have three characters, I don't expect you to do three voices between all of these characters, but I'm curious of what kind of scene are you interested in showcasing the siblings off in? Are they going to meet a podcast character? Is it just going to be like the siblings talking among themselves? Is it them stumbling upon the well for the very first time? What kind of scene are you interested in showcasing them in?
I think a day in the life of their business. So you can bring one of your characters in, and
And maybe introduce the side quest?
yeah,
All right. So, of my podcast characters that I have, who are you interested in them meeting? Because, of course, we have Duncan, who's the recklessly brave adventurer for hire, happy go lucky fighter guy. We've got Sonia, the warrior woman who multiclassed into a paladin. We've got Korak, the lawful evil arcane trickster roguish dwarf. We have Chrisley, the herbalist botanist wood elf druid who multiclassed to cleric. We have Orion, the astral elf illusionist wizard. And then we've also got Agape, who is the lilac colored tiefling, wild magic, Feywild leaning sorcerer. And so, and if none of those sound good, we can totally invent a brand new NPC as well.
Duncan sounds good.
Where we last left our hero Duncan, he was finishing up on a whale of a tale of an adventure when he got the hint from Mirko, the Tabaxi falconer, and he went off to go chase those stories about the treasure and the overdue library book, the sea creatures attacking, all sorts of things. It was a whole ordeal. And, that tested Duncan's sea legs for a good bit, and he's ready for some dry land once again. It's not that long before he hears a rumor in that town about like this really interesting dungeon complex out a little bit away from the town. And so Duncan goes exploring as any adventurer would, and it's not too long as he's delving into this dungeon that he comes across like what he might consider like a very small wayside pit stop tavern watering hole sort of a thing like you would find on the surface. And so Duncan kind of carefully approaches, and as he gets closer, what does he see?
He's greeted by Rosewald. And she says, "Welcome to our humble spot. Would you like some water, some turkey legs? I know it can get wild out there in the dungeon, but here you can rest up and before you get out there again."
Oh, well, hello there. Wow, thank you so much for your kindness. I promise I was not reaching for my weapon. I've had to deal with goblins in the past, but this is a um. So Duncan's starting to trip over his words a little bit as he's trying to explain. He's just overwhelmed by the sudden approach of Rosewald and explaining, and so he's quickly trying to like catch himself to not say something stupid or foolish because he is chaotic good after all. So sometimes his foot gets in his mouth. But we'll say he's quickly looking around for a sign, and he's like, "Oh, what is this lovely abode that I might be able to add to my tales of adventure to say that I stayed at?"
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't really even have a name yet, but we just want to serve all the denizens of this underground subterranean dungeon. Like whether you be adventurer or monster, everyone is welcome here.
Wow. And you'll see Duncan like takes a second to like recognize her words, and he's just like impressed. He's just like, "Well, that is really good to hear. I've learned a lot about myself these last few adventures I've had. That the world is not exactly so black and white, but there's shades of gray, and there's good people in the places you would least expect it." He looks over towards the well, and maybe he sees a really kind of like menacing up a little bit just reflexively, and so he stops speaking for a second to like but get adjusted, but he's like, yeah, yes, I will, yeah, I will sit down and I'm just happy to be back on dry land for a little bit. So as to sheepishly make his way to a table that's there provided, is it particularly busy today?
Yeah, you actually see a very strange scene of just like fighter and full plate, like not too far away from like an orc at a different table. It's just like what is going on? It's just kind of this surreal, like unwritten rule. This is
Mhm.
just neutral ground, and you kind of just see everyone there. Maybe even a vampire in the,
Oh.
in the corner. That would be kind of crazy, but I haven't decided how unbelievable this would be yet. But yeah,
Mhm.
maybe.
Since Rosewald was speaking to him initially and taking his order, he definitely would say a turkey leg. I think would be very fine indeed. You're not familiar with Corvus, the arbiter of the Accords, are you? I did have to go. I did have to go. Now I did have to fight some of your kin who worshipped the Goobliet because they had taken over a temple to the Raven Queen, but that is in the past now. But he was a gentleman that was very concerned with the balance between order and chaos, and in my memory recesses, I'm just getting like a hint of that. So I'm wondering if you've ever ran across a tale about him. He's a Kenku fellow. He's one of the bird people.
I can't say I have. We do get a lot of
Well, he's stuck at his place. He can't leave. That's kind of his rule. But I was
okay.
just curious because I saw the inspiration. I was just overwhelmed. Yeah. And Duncan will keep talking nervously, and he's trying to get his foot out of his mouth. And so sometimes it takes him a little while to learn the lesson of like, sometimes it's better to just not say anything and just be quiet and observe and listen and, let others do the talking instead of you.
As he's thinking, like he sees over to Areli and she's like tapping her scimitar against her hands and she's like, if you want water, it's 5 gold pieces per bucket. So She's kind of a gruff. She's not very like charismatic, so she's just kind of the tough person. She's standing over by the well.
And does she have like a cadre of other bigger goblin noids that are with her?
Yes, yeah, just they're definitely the muscle in this establishment.
And then Duncan will just say, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, I could do with a bucket." He'll look around as kind of like a way to like win his way with everyone. He'll say, "A round of bucket of waters for everyone, my treat." And so he like pulls out his coin pouch and he starts pulling out like a lot of gold pieces.
Wow.
Does that win over anybody else?
Everyone's a little confused because that doesn't happen. So it is neutral ground, but everyone's comes here to talk, but they're not necessarily trusting of each other. So,
Hmm.
but there's some people that seem appreciative of the gesture.
I was gonna say, I wonder if the vampire's offended that I bought him a bucket of water, since water is kind of against their thing.
Yeah, yeah.
The nice imposing gentleman over there can have blood. I'll pay for his blood if that's what he wants. Hopefully, it's good beef blood. Yeah, so Duncan's gonna wait for his turkey leg and paying for all the buckets of water to go with everyone. Do these gnolls maybe enter the scene?
Oh yes, there's a little disturbance by in the corner where you see a bunch of gnolls, and then suddenly a smoke bomb explodes.
Wah!
The gnolls are no longer there.
And Duncan like jumps up from his table, like ready for an adventure. He hasn't pulled out any weapons yet, but he's like looking around. He calls over and he's like, "Is everyone okay? Does anyone need help? I'm helpful. I have the business card that says so." And he like reaches into a pouch to pull out one of his business cards to hold up.
And that's when Rosewald comes over and she's like yelling. She's like, "They didn't pay. They ordered several turkey legs, which are 100 gold pieces each."
Duncan did not realize the tab he was going to be incurring today. And he'll be like, "That's how much you charge for a turkey leg? Well, I mean, far be it from me to tell people how to do their business, but I think you would do much better if you perhaps lowered some of your prices."
Well, we're the only business in town.
He looks around the dungeon area and he can see like cobwebs and old skeleton bones and all these other things. And he's like, all right, point taken, point taken. Well, I can help. Do you need help? Do you need me to go? Do you need someone to go chase them down?"
Oh, that would be perfect. There are rules here that must be followed. Like, we allow everyone to come, whether you're evil, good, vampire, goblin, or human, but we don't appreciate being disrespected.
Hmm. Of course, yes. You're trying to run an upstanding business. I get it. I see. I see. He looks around to the crowd gathered. Maybe Finn has poked his head out of the kitchen shack at this point because of the smoke bomb and the explosion and stuff like that. But he addresses the crowd like a heroic fantasy movie. And he's like, "Customers, friends, compatriots." And he like starts going into a monologue. "I swear to you, by the name and the deeds that are printed on this business card," which he hands to Rosewald, which just says, "Adventure for hire, no feat too daring, no mission too daunting, patron of the Crypts and Creatures Stonecast." And he says, "I swear that I will apprehend these no good dine and dashers and I will set things right." He waits to see if the audience of people has any reaction to him. Or are they just like staring at him like, "Why are you talking like this?"
Yeah, they're just a little bit confused at him. Like, they don't often see anyone like that, just having a giant monologue to no one in particular. So,
Yeah, so Duncan will just be like, Duncan, you really need to work better at reading the room. You really need to work better at reading the room." Okay. He holds up his arm, which has his crossbow contraption on it. He pulls out the walking cane that emanates a lightsaber like glow, and he'll say, "Don't worry, I will deal with these ruffians, and I will be back post haste. Onward." Before he starts dashing, he'll look over at Finn, who he hasn't had much interaction with, but he'll say, "Keep the turkey leg hot. I will be back to eat it. Onward!" And he dashes off, trying to follow the trail of where the gnolls disappeared off to. And scene. So there we go.
yeah,
So what
thank
did
you
you
so much.
think of your being in a random encounter with 3 NPCs to manage?
It was difficult to try to manage them all, but in
Sure,
my
yeah.
head, but and I loved thinking on my feet and just trying to figure it out. And you've obviously had more than one of these rodeos. It's not your first time.
Yeah, with 100 episodes, you kind of learn a thing or two.
Yeah.
So, do you like that idea? Because I was going to ask before if they had a name for this place, but I kind of liked how Rosewald answered in character of like, "Oh, we don't really have a name for this place." So it goes to give your game a more world building idea. Maybe after how this side quest plays out, they decide to come up with a name that's reflective with how the side quest resolved.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Yeah, so far it's pretty much a pop-up business. They didn't flesh everything out much like me so far.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I like to think like if you handle it very honorably and maybe you get the gnolls to come back to pay themselves or you acquire the money, but you promise you didn't kill them, like, and you really truly didn't kill them, maybe there's like a name for the place that they affix like some sort of honorific that has to do with like nobility or being honorable or fair or something like that. But then if you're like more renegade and you just go slaughter a bunch of gnolls and come back with the money, then maybe it's something more, violent sounding name like the hack and slash or whatever they decide to call it, and based on if you resolve it negatively.
yeah, things to think about. I'm leaning more towards the positive since my PCs are probably going to be like my kids. So.
Oh yeah, sure, sure. But you never know. Kids can surprise you with
Oh yeah,
they want to beat up the gnolls. Maybe it's not a like a violent they're dead. They just beat them up really badly. Then they name the place Black Eye Knolls or something like that. And it's like, yeah, because there's these gnolls that try to run out on us. We gave them a bunch of black eyes. So
yeah.
there you go. Which almost sounds like the restaurant Black Eyed Peas, which, could also be a very fun play on words. Then Finn Wheatley decides to expand the menu and offer up black eyed peas for people to eat along with turkey legs.
All great ideas.
Well, that's what I do. I give away great ideas for free. So,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. But yeah, as we're starting to get into the final thoughts segment of the show, what did you think of your time on the podcast, your experience with your 15 minutes of fame, as it were?
Oh yeah, this has been great. I was able to bring some ideas and just more fully flesh it out, just like talk it through with you, and just like it's been super helpful. And I also just I love just being able to interact with role playing games again since I was probably gone from the hobby for like a decade.
So, you think this will be an approach that you'll use in the future when you're world building or inventing characters for your games, whether they're going to be for friends your age or maybe perhaps your children?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna like save some of the questions and just kind of think through them. Then I'll grab a friend and just be like, hey, like let's try to.
Yeah, especially if someone's coming up with a character backstory, you might probe them with some of these questions to kind of ask more details about like the person and their backstory, and then you can flesh out like a whole quest line with them and stuff like that.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, of course, yeah. And before, we end every episode, we like to turn the microphone, the stage, the soapbox, the platform over to the guests. So if you want to be found online, because I do respect people's privacy, where can we find you online? Are there any other projects or things that you work on that you're passionate about that you want us to know about? Are there any causes or anything that you want us to be made aware of?
I wish, but right now I'm more of just like a busy dad and getting through life, and this is one thing that's brought a little bit more enjoyment back and a great way to spend time with my kids. If anyone wants to reach out about any of the topics that I mentioned I'm interested in, find me on Facebook or Telegram. My handle on Telegram is at Phantom Watchdog, which for anyone who, well, no one would know this, but as an icebreaker, I was presented with the idea of like, what would your superhero name be? And so that's the one I came up with. So it's kind of
Okay.
like, it's kind of inspired by Danny Phantom. I don't know if you remember that
Oh,
TV
yeah, yeah,
show,
yeah,
like
yeah.
probably like 15 years ago at this point. And a cross between that and there was, I don't remember the spell. There was a spell in third edition. I don't remember what it's called. It's like you have like this dog that like a magical dog that like keeps watch over your party if they're resting. And
Mm,
the name escapes me right now, but it was kind of a mashup.
that sounds like a really cool and useful spell.
Maybe it's not in fifth. I imagined it was. I know it was not in second, but I'd have to look it up at some point. But there was a useful spell where you just had this magical dog that can like it's essentially a guard dog that was a spell that kept your party safe while the no one could sneak up on you.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So, anyways, that's at Phantom Dash Watchdog on Telegram. But I'm not really on Instagram or anything, or I don't really have a website. But if anyone wants to reach out, that's me.
Well, Kevin, It was awesome to have you on the podcast. I'm glad you reached out and wanted to be a guest on the show. I'm glad we can make that happen. And can't wait to be speaking to you again in the future and making even more random NPCs.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, and Overcast. Or just feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on various social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit by searching for Side KQ Podcast. You can also find a very tiny community that's growing on Discord as well. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. If you would like to hail the bard, simply send an email to sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you please leave a review on iTunes. Give it 5 stars, why don't you? And help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creations section of the show, I do in fact have a Patreon. If you love this podcast and you want to help support and expand our operations, I would appreciate it so much if you would go over to patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. We have modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations, and we welcome all patrons to the levitating platter. Sidekicks and Sidequests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy, meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards. Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast. Copyright Wizards of the Coast, LLC, Common Creative License, OGL, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.